on their app.
Hi, everybody. I'm Crystal Haynes. Tonight on Greater Boston, hostages and prisoners are being released and the fighting between Israel and Hamas has stopped for now. But what happens next in Gaza? Plus,
Green Line shuttle going to Hines and Copley.
More shutdowns on the Green Line as officials hope repairs will put an end to the slow zones. GBH News transportation reporter Bob Seay will join me on what this means for riders. Israel and Hamas will hold their fire for another 2 days, according to a spokesperson from the Qatari government, which has been mediating the negotiations. Now, over the first 3 days of this truce, Hamas has released 58 Israeli hostages, including a 4-year-old American-Israeli girl, a few hours back. And Israel has freed 117 Palestinian prisoners. Another exchange is expected in the next day or so. The truce has put a pause on the constant violence that we've seen since the Hamas attack on Israel early last month and allowed much needed aid to make it into Gaza. But Israel is making it clear the conflict is far from over.
This is a pause, it's not a ceasefire. Israel cannot and will not allow itself to stop pushing against Hamas to remove that threat following October 7th. Because we cannot allow ourselves to have Hamas continue to rule Gaza, rearm, regroup, and strike again.
So what comes next here? Well, to discuss it, I'm joined by Dr. Nadim Rouhana, professor of international negotiation and conflict studies at Tufts Fletcher School of Global Affairs. Thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be with you.
So, what do you make of this latest ceasefire and the release of hostages on either side? Is this a good sign that perhaps some sort of peace can come at least down the road?
This is a very good sign, and this is a very good development. As you know, the parties agreed on 2 more days of truce in which Hamas will release hostages, women and children, and Israel would release also prisoners. Many of them are held without trial, also women and children. That should be emphasized. Actually, Israel holds hundreds of children, of Palestinian children and women. So it's that kind of exchange between the two parties. The question in my mind is how that is going to be continued. And as we heard from the ambassador, the Israeli ambassador, Israel is determined, at least in public statements, to continue the war. And what the world is seeing now is that the war did have a devastating effect on 2.3 million Gazans, and it's very hard to continue the war in the southern part of Gaza, which will have all the Gazans, because the people on the north were ethnically pushed, were displaced into the south. So the question is really whether the war would really continue or not. That is the big question. And in my mind, the decision, or a big part of the decision, rests on the American administration, President Biden in particular. So far, he has been supporting Israel unconditionally, and the question is whether he would support the continuation of the war.
Do you think that if the war continues in the same earnestness that it has, do you think that other countries will then begin to enter the conflict? We are seeing these horrific images, many of them little children, especially if you're on social media. One doctor, a Palestinian doctor that lives in London, held a press conference recently, said upwards of something like 700 to 900 children are amputees now. Do you think that the international community is going to start to enter this conflict in earnest?
The international community depends what we mean. If we mean people like you and me, if we mean the young generation of people all over the world, south and north, Europe, the US, people want a ceasefire because they see the human price of the Israeli action in Gaza. I want to tell you something. There was an Israeli general used last week the term of Holocaust, humanitarian Holocaust, he said, to describe what's happening in Gaza. And he used actually the Hebrew word for the term. So I don't think he was exaggerating in terms of the human price in Gaza. So if you mean by the international community, the decision makers and the policy makers, there is movement also. I mean, the world by majority voted for ceasefire in the UN. The South voted for ceasefire. Many European countries voted for ceasefire. Many countries are calling now, Belgium and Spain called for ceasefire openly. But Israel listens to this country. Israel listens to this administration, and for obvious reasons, because this country supports the diplomatic cover, the military support, the financial support, and so on. And I think this is why I think the keys are in the White House. Now, in terms of expanding, that is possible. I don't think parties in the region are interested in that. Hezbollah was involved in that, but I don't think Hezbollah wants to enter now based on their own calculation that they want to enter the war now. But these things are unpredictable, and things can develop. If the human scene that we see in Gaza, that's emerging now to the whole world and certainly to the Middle East, and people there, of course, are sensitive to what they are seeing, it's possible that things will go out of hand. And the candidates for that are obviously Hezbollah. The Houthis in Yemen are already involved. And so the war might expand.
So in terms of if there is a ceasefire, let's say a ceasefire happens sometime down the line, that may not stabilize this region because the ties that bind the folks here have already been severed many years before this conflict. And there's so much more that needs to be negotiated, hashed out, and perhaps agreed upon. And is that possible at this point after this?
You are absolutely right. I mean, the world, again, including the US and including President Biden, are talking about two-state solution, reviving the idea of two-state solution. Of course, recently, in the last 20 years or so, there was a lip service to two-state solution. Europe is talking about two-state solution. The region is talking about that. Israel is opposed to that completely the guidelines of the current Israeli government are against it. This is not a secret, as you know. So it's very hard to revive that. But in my mind, one thing that the region should be talking about and thinking about, and the world thinking about, is some kind of principles that should guide the relationships between Israelis and Palestinians. And these should be equality. These should be no privileges to one group over another. These should be no supremacy of one group over the other. And if we agree on these basic human principles, I think if we agree on that, we can think then about the political arrangement that would reflect these principles. As of now, I must say that there is no agreement on these terms, and sadly, there is no push from the world to the parties to declare commitment to these principles.
I think when the average American that definitely does not have your expertise in this region tries to think about the conflict that's happening in Gaza and Israel, they think of a separate entity of Hamas and Palestine or Palestinians or the Palestinian Authority. And so when you're looking at that strictly, do the folks in that region also struggle with the separation, or are they just more worried about, surviving the next day?
Well, I think people who are watching the conflict are really worried about surviving the next day, about how the 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza can survive, because what we see is the number of people who were killed, wounded, are in the tens of thousands, including children. But I think we have to understand that Hamas is an idea, in addition to being a movement that seeks to achieve political goals that we might not agree with, and we might not agree, not many people agree on the means that they use, of course, but it's an idea. And for Israel to destroy Hamas, as it says it wants to achieve, to eliminate Hamas, this is the language, the discourse that they use, has to be done. There's no way to do it without destroying the Palestinian people in Gaza, without destroying the Palestinian nation, men, women, and so on. So what we have seen is, people, as you know, many scholars describe that as genocide. We can avoid the term, but it's getting very close to means that use genocidal thinking and genocidal atrocities. And so if you want to eliminate Hamas, that's the way to do it. And because it's an idea, and to get them, you have to get the Palestinian people and do in the south more than what you did in the north, because the whole population of Gaza is now in the south of Gaza, which is half of Gaza.
All right, there's so much to talk about as this continues to unfold in the region, and we see so many people have lost their lives. Just a tragic situation all around. Dr. Nadim Rouhana, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
You are welcome. Thank you.
Next up, it has never been easy to be an MBTA rider. We know that. And this week, it's even harder as commuters who rely on the Green Line, parts of which are now down for track repairs until December 5th. Green Line trains won't run between North Station and Babcock on the B branch, to Kenmore on the C and D, and to Heath Street on the E branch. Well, it is just the first in a lengthy and expensive series of repairs to the Green Line to fix widespread track problems and hopefully eliminate slow zones for the good. But in the meantime, the shutdown is yet another in a long line of headaches for riders.
It's just frustrating, especially after a long weekend and trying to get back to work.
Makes me 30 minutes late to work.
I do not like being late, so definitely a little bit frustrating.
Well, GBH News transportation reporter Bob Seay joins me now to discuss this. Right in time for the holiday, we've got a Green Line shutdown, Bob.
Yes, Crystal, the timing maybe isn't as good as it could be, but at least the work is starting to get done. And this is, of course, across the entire system. Over the next year, there are going to be several diversions and shutdowns, but they're beginning with the Green Line. And the most, it's one of the busiest lines, and certainly the oldest. So there's a lot of work to be done. And generally what's happening is between Copley and North Station is been the area that they've had the most problems with. And so that's where they're going to be working over the next 9 days.
So we do have a map of this Green Line route with the closures sort of X'd out on it to give folks an idea of what we're looking at right now. So talk to me a little bit about these closures. Are they going to be going from one stop to another? Is it going to be working on all of the problem areas simultaneously?
Yes, they're going to be working on all of these areas, the main areas where all the branches come together at Kenmore and then travel up to North Station through the tunnel. And they have noticed there's a lot of problems with the tunnel that have to be fixed. And you may remember over the past couple of weeks, they've had problems with the power line, the overhead power line in the tunnel, pieces of it falling down. So they're doing not only track work, but they're repairing parts of the tunnel and also the power system. So that's going to require that whole section to be shut down. And then they're doing parts of the other branches, which you might be able to see on this chart, which is a little mind-boggling when you take a look at it. But most people who use the Green Line probably will get used to making these changes over the next few days. As you mentioned, on the B branch, shuttles are subbing all day between Copley and Babcock Street. But it's normal trolley service from there to Boston College. On the C branch, you'll have to take a shuttle this week between Copley and Kenmore Square, but all the above ground C branch stops will be running as usual. And on the D branch, while there are shuttles between Copley and Kenmore, Green Line service is running as normal between Riverside and Kenmore this week and next. But the D branch service from Riverside to Kenmore will be suspended and replaced by shuttles for 10 days later this month. But we'll get to that when it happens. And then the entire southern part of the E branch from Copley to Heath Street is suspended from today through Tuesday. And the T is making the 39 bus free and available for people as an alternative. So work will be happening on all of these branches as well as the central trunk. But the hope is that there will be some major speed restrictions lifted by the time this is all over.
So, Bob, is this part of sort of that large recommendation that federal officials and others had directed the T to start making some of these changes very quickly?
Yes, and I think that the T really didn't have a good comprehensive picture of just how much was broken. And that's what they spent the last several weeks doing, is surveying the entire system. And what they have found is that there are these areas that are going to require attention. They recently did the Red Line from JFK, UMass South, which was fairly successful. People riding the Red Line noticed a difference. And that's the hope that with this work, people will realize that even though the shutdown is inconvenient, it will be worth the trouble once the service is resumed.
So, is there any new hope in terms of some stability on the T now that there has been the appointment of Transportation Secretary Monica Tibbetts not there?
I think that the hiring of Phil Eng as the general manager last spring and his bringing aboard 4 people that he worked with in New York on the transit system there, they are the management team that is now running the T and running the project to fix it. It's a massive undertaking. And the fact that they can actually potentially remove all the speed restrictions by the end of next year is ambitious, but it is something they think they can do. There's like 180 speed restrictions right now, affecting a good 20% of the subway system. So there's plenty of work to do. Right.
And, we all know that money, we talked about these changes, money is necessary because these are expensive changes. New Transportation Secretary Monica Tibbetts said in a Zoom meeting that we're going to need to get some more money from the state. So take a listen to this.
The amount of money that is coming from the legislature is not enough. And I don't think that that's even a controversial thing to say. That's just simple math. It isn't enough. We cannot make that money contingent on, the service needs to be this level of quality. You need this level of on-time performance to get that money, because you can't achieve that if you don't have that money. You put the T in a difficult position where they can only lose because there's no winning that way.
What do you think about that, Bob? It does seem like the T is at least in the losers column right now, if you ask some riders.
Well, when you look at the overall amount of work that has to be done, that may be true. But the work that's being done now is actually being funded by some of the millions of extra dollars that were given to the T last year by the legislature. So that's going to pay for a lot of this work. But moving ahead, there's going to be much more work that needs to be done, which will require large amounts of money at some point to fix. And also, The T, of course, is facing a budget shortfall as ridership still isn't up to the level it should be. So that's another concern. But until they fix the T so that it's reliable and quick and gets people to where they want to go in a timely fashion, people aren't going to be returning to ride the T. So it's really important that they get these tracks fixed as soon as possible.
What do you think will be the largest disruption of all of this, sort of long laundry list of things that the T was mandated to get fixed?
Well, this is going to be one of the major ones, the Green Line trunk section, which has been troublesome for some time. And as I mentioned, you have all these branches coming together in this trunk section. So that's going to affect a lot of people. But moving ahead, there are going to be effects all over the system, and people are just going to have to pay attention to the information the T is putting out so there will be, made aware of it. But where it can, the T is providing some kind of alternative bus shuttle service for people or advising them on other ways to get around. But there's no question that over the next year, there are going to be several disruptions all around the system. But I think if you talk to riders, they would say, well, if this is what it takes to fix the system once and for all, then we support it. And that's what I've been hearing from riders that I talk to.
Is there a winter weather plan when we're thinking about all of these repairs that need to happen? Because we all know it's New England and winter is coming.
Yeah, they're aware of that, but I don't think they necessarily have adjusted the work schedule to that weather. I think they're just assuming that there will be some winter weather at some point, but I don't think that the work that they planned is necessarily tied into that. There will be, shutdowns from 4 days to 21 days and all those times in between. So some of the shutdowns will be shorter than others, and they will occur in different parts of the system. And there will be bus shuttles available, which may not, be the total answer in terms of the weather, but at least it will help.
Absolutely. Is there anything that you think folks really need to be aware right now as they're looking at this segment, they're watching and they're like, oh man, how am I going to navigate the T in the next coming months?
Well, the T, is trying to put out as much information as possible on their website. If you sign up for MBTA Alerts, you'll be informed about what's going on. They're trying to get the information out as comprehensively as possible to as many people and in time so that people can prepare. But that's about the best that people can do is to, tune in to the website, listen to what we're saying on the radio, and various other media about what's going to happen. But this is where the rubber hits the road in the sense that the T really has to address these long-standing problems it's had with its infrastructure. And with GM Eng's leadership, they seem to be getting to it. He said it's a new way of doing business at the T. We're going to see if that's true. But they have organized this over the next several months in an orderly fashion so that people can actually go to the website and see what's coming, what's going to be coming in the weeks and months ahead.
All right, everybody, pack your patience. Bob C.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay.
And finally tonight, it has been a big year for Black Boston. From the unveiling of the Embrace Monument honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King in January to the National NAACP Convention in July, all highlighting the city's Black culture and power. But what have these events meant for Nubian Square, long considered the center of Black culture in Boston? Morning Edition co-host Paris Alston talks with residents and business owners there to find out. Take a look.
What is your favorite part about Nubian Square?
The people. We love each other. We have our issues just like anyone does, but Roxbury is family.
I'm here in Nubian Square, which has long been considered the heart of Black culture in Boston. More than half the residents here are Black. Now, it's been a big year for Black Boston, beginning with the unveiling of the Embrace sculpture on Boston Common and the NAACP convention in the Seaport. And that got me wondering, what has all of that meant for this community? To find out, let's take a walk down the block. Are you familiar with the Embrace sculpture? And then there was the NAACP convention. What did you make of those in terms of what it did for Boston's Black communities?
It did bring more activity to downtown Boston, but we need more Black-owned businesses in the Dudley area.
Black people don't live down there, so why would you put that statue where all the white people are from?
I'm grateful for the art, but maybe you can use that for a subsidy for people to be able to stay in their communities.
Robert George, executive director of Roxbury Main Streets, says he's heard similar thoughts. We know that this has been a big year for Black Boston. What has that meant for the vitality of Nubian Square?
Overall, those are all excellent projects. However, part of what my job is to walk the streets and listen to the business owners. And I heard basically from 90 to 95% of them that, for instance, the NWC conference had no effect on our community. And it was designed for, some put it, elite Boston.
I think it was an amazing first step to have the convention here, but I think there's still a bit of a disconnect between some of the events that we have and some of the actually impact in the neighborhoods in which we live in.
Rufus J. Falk has lived in Roxbury almost all his life.
Black culture in Roxbury and Boston in particular has dated back centuries. We haven't done a great enough job at sort of highlighting what makes this neighborhood and what makes the people in this neighborhood so great.
We're meeting here in front of the Faces of Dudley mural. What all can you tell me about this mural?
We got a picture of Brother Malcolm, a picture of Melnia Cassie. You see everything in between is sort of the Roxbury I grew up with and loved. Look at it now, there aren't as many stores, it isn't that much activity, but I think there's so much potential to sort of rebuild that.
Private investors are planning to bring mixed-use developments here over the next few years, including retail and cultural spaces like the Embrace Boston Center, as well as life sciences labs and housing. But City Councilor Tanya Fernange Anderson says it's going to take more than fancy buildings.
What I would say is that as long as you can build a box for me and you put me in it and all I have to come out is clean your kitchens and work your restaurants, then that is not real economic mobility. Without economic integration, there is no community.
It's a two-edged sword. I'm excited about the growth and the change of the modernization of Nubian Square. Well, the thing we have to guard against is gentrification.
And that's something I heard a lot from folks around here.
I would just say to my fellow gentrifiers, please partake in the mom and pop shops. Please go to the bodegas because when you live in silos, it's hurtful.
But everyone I spoke to can agree on this. Celebrating Boston's Black culture means investing in the neighborhood at its center.
How do we bring the sort of traditions that made Roxbury what it was, sort of update them so now we can sort of expand upon it and make sure that it's like the culture hasn't died and we can sort of build upon it.
Well, that's it for tonight, but we'll be right back here tomorrow. I'm Crystal Haynes. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.